For Christians throughout the world, we begin today the sacred Triduum, the holiest time of the year for us, when we immerse ourselves in those events that brought us salvation. Our Jewish brothers and sisters are celebrating Passover, that great event we hear about in the reading from the book of Exodus. The celebration of Passover and of the Last Supper are not merely events from the distant past, but are relived in us as we celebrate these rituals that affirm God's continuing work in our world. Both Passover and the Last Supper are events that bring people together. Moses prescribes in Exodus that individuals or families join together in order to consume the lamb. Jesus, in celebrating the Last Supper, gathers his apostles together in the upper room for this most holy night. We realize from these events the importance of presence, the presence of God with his people, and of our being with one another. Yet, because of the coronavirus, we are not able to gather, not able to join with fellow believers in these most sacred commemorations. But distance and the inability to gather under one roof does not negate the meaning of what God has done for us, his people. In our reading from Exodus, Moses prepares God's people for the last of the plagues, when the firstborn of the Egyptians are struck down. The blood of the lamb on the lintel and the doorpost is a sign that the household is to be passed over and not feel the effects of the plague. The Hebrew people eat the lamb and the unleavened bread so that they would be ready to flee Egypt on very short notice. It is the night that God will deliver them from slavery to the Egyptians, and they will begin their trek to the Promised Land. In the celebration of Passover, Jesus gathers with his disciples, recalling the great events that led to freedom from slavery, deliverance from oppression, and the movement to living their covenant with God in freedom. The Passover meal is not merely a remembrance, it is a reliving of that great event. As Jesus approaches his own death, he is very conscious of the importance of presence. While at the Last Supper, Jesus tells his apostles something that is wondrous. This is my body. This is my blood. It is the salvific act that gives us Jesus' presence forever until he returns again at the end of time. After speaking these words over the bread and wine, Jesus gives the command, "Do this in remembrance of me." He fulfills the deepest hunger of our hearts to be at one with God by giving us his very self under the forms of bread and wine. Jesus proves that he wants to journey with us, to be that food for immortality, to give us here on earth a foretaste of what is to come when we are at last one with him. Today, we also hear from St. John's Gospel what Jesus did after the meal. In an act that was unthinkable, Jesus washes the feet of his apostles. Peter objects, but Jesus is undeterred in giving example to those whom he has called to be his followers. The act of washing feet is one of servanthood, stemming from the hospitality that is offered during that time when one traveled dusty roads to arrive at a destination. It is an act of humility, bending down and cleansing another's feet from dirt. Jesus wanted to connect receiving his own body and blood with service. As he is present to us in the Holy Eucharist, he calls us to be his own hands and feet in reaching out to others. I cannot help today but to think about all those who are in service to those who are ill from the coronavirus, the doctors, nurses, health professionals, members of the armed forces, and emergency medical personnel who are going well beyond the call of duty so that others who are afflicted can survive this dreaded plague. What an example they are to us of washing the feet of others, being present to those who need not only their medical expertise, but the presence of another person who cares. Others are helping their neighbors who are homebound by checking on them and making sure that they have the grocery supplies that they need. We do not have to look very far these days for examples of being Jesus' body and blood for others. Jesus, in showing us the way to service, teaches us that we are called to be his presence when we receive his very self in the Eucharist. Dear brothers and sisters, I unite myself today with my brother priest who have accepted the great responsibility of ordination and who, like me, feel the great emptiness of not being able to celebrate this Triduum with you, God's people. But their ministry continues in the various ways in which they are reaching out, especially in the way of prayer. With the deacons and the men and women religious who serve our church, I am united with them in celebrating the mandate of the Lord Jesus to wash the feet of others. For they do so in countless ways, many times unknown to but one or a few people, seeking to bring the presence of Jesus to the newborn through to the elderly. Beginning this sacred Triduum, I also wish to assure the men and women who have prepared to receive the Easter sacraments of baptism, Eucharist, and confirmation of my prayers. As a church, we yearn for that time when you will fully receive these sacraments so that you can be united with us at the table of the Lord. In this past month, we have all realized the importance of presence, of being able to attend services at our places of worship, of visiting with family and friends whenever we would like, and even the presence we find in greeting those people whom we do not know as we go about our daily routines. Our deepest hunger is the one for the presence of God. Jesus satisfies this hunger by his presence in his body and blood. May we have that true hunger for him as he so much desires to be with us.